What was meant to project unity instead spiraled into awkward confusion. On the 4th anniversary of the war in Ukraine, leaders of the so-called Coalition of the Willing gathered virtually to show resolve. Instead, cameras froze, audio glitched, and diplomacy stumbled in real time. As UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer tried to connect with Volodymyr Zelensky, the world watched a summit slip into disorder. But behind the technical chaos was something far more serious: money, weapons, and a widening geopolitical rift. With 90 billion euros in EU funds blocked and new accusations flying from Moscow, this was more than a bad video call. This was a coalition under pressure. The meeting was designed to send a message of strength. Instead, it opened with confusion. As leaders dialed in, Prime Minister Keir Starmer was heard struggling to see and hear President Zelensky. "We can hear you, we cannot see you," he said at one point, before adding awkwardly, "I see someone, but they don't quite look like you."
Thank you very much for organizing and involving us in this event. I'm waiting for a signal from Ukraine. Hello, Keir. Hello, we're here. We're here. Mr. Volodymyr, we hear you, but we don't see you for some reason. We'd like to ask to get the video feed now, please.
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you. Well, I'm not sure. Oh, there it is. The picture has appeared. Thank you very much.
Oh, I see someone, but there's something about them that doesn't quite resemble you.
Thirdly, it is absolutely essential that we provide assistance to Ukraine in defending itself.
We shouldn't assume that just because some negotiations are currently underway, it means we no longer need to assist Ukraine in defending itself. We perfectly understand that Putin is trying to delay these talks, that only he, just one individual, stands in the way of any progress in these negotiations, and that person is Putin.
Here of Emmanuel. My dear friends, first and foremost, I want to express my gratitude for your presence here with us today and for your unwavering support throughout all these years. This is a great historical challenge, and we are deeply grateful that Ukraine has such wonderful friends as yourselves, and we are very proud of this. Today, we have a coalition of the willing, and we have 36 countries, 36 representatives who are supporting us, gathered around Ukraine. They support us in our defense against Russian aggression. I am very grateful for this support. This is important. I will speak very quickly. We do not have much time. As Keir has just informed us, we are currently speaking on an open communication line. We were not previously aware of this fact, but that is perfectly fine. What can I tell you? There are absolutely no secrets. They're tankers. And of course, we are counting on not having so many challenges with those 90 billion.
The decision was a good one, but these funds are desperately needed right here in Ukraine to help our brave soldiers and our civilians. And Mr. President, allow me to emphasize once more that we are helping you, and of course we will continue to help you and all the people of Ukraine. I am very glad to see you. I'd like to get straight to the point right away. Firstly, I want to extend my congratulations to all the efforts and initiatives that are related to the peace talks. However, I remain quite skeptical about the possibility of achieving any lasting peace in the immediate short-term future. But let's understand this crucial fact. There is no discernible vision from the Russian side concerning peace, not one that is as clearly defined or as resolute as what we envision from our own perspective. Consequently, it is absolutely imperative that we steadfastly continue to advance and move forward.
And I completely agree with you, Keir, and Mr. President of Ukraine, that you have indeed achieved some notable successes on the battlefield, and Militarily, economically, and strategically, the Russians have been dealt a defeat, and they are currently suffering defeat at this very moment. What is it that we must do beyond what is already being implemented? Firstly, we must continue providing support. I would like to express my gratitude to all the members of the coalition for the assistance they have provided. We will continue to discuss this, and Mr. Anthony will likely speak about the 90 billion. We have no other option here, no other choice is possible, as the relevant decisions have already been made. Thank you, Mr. Volodymyr, for speaking about your request. We will still gather at the level of the G7 leaders. And there is also absolutely clear support from the Group of 7 regarding the energy sector, which directly concerns your request for air defense systems. We also heard a second point about increasing pressure on Russia. We must work on the 20th package of sanctions.
While the technology faltered, President Zelensky focused on something far more urgent: money. Specifically, the 90 billion European Union support package intended to bolster Ukraine's military and civilian resilience. The funds have been delayed after Hungary blocked the measure, creating friction inside the EU. Zelensky made clear Kyiv needs the money now to support soldiers on the front lines and civilians under strain. Starmer used the platform to sharpen his rhetoric against Vladimir Putin, accusing Moscow of dragging its feet on peace and deliberately prolonging the war. But French President Emmanuel Macron struck a more cautious tone. He admitted he was relatively skeptical about the prospects for near-term peace, even as he acknowledged Ukraine's battlefield resilience.
We must continue to help Ukraine defend herself and not get drawn into the idea that because there are talks going on, that somehow that means that we don't have to do the hard yards of helping Ukraine to defend herself. We know that Putin is dragging his heels. We know that when it comes to the talk, there's one person standing in the way of progress in those talks, and that is Putin, and nobody but Putin. Russia depends on Europe for 25% of its oil insurance and services. So depriving Moscow of that would take 1 million barrels a day of oil, Russian oil, off the market. So there are things that we can do, that we are doing, and we need to simply go further and faster.
We are thankful for the last package of air defense, and I can't share all the details, but half of the package is already here. It came 2 days ago, so thank you so much. This is important. We really count on continuation of this program. Then sanctions, we count on strong support from EU leaders and presidents of Commission and Council. So we're really proud that we have such relations. We count on the next package of sanctions, especially shadow fleet, Russian shadow fleet, to stop their tankers. And of course, we count on not to have too much challenges with 90 billion. The decision was great, but we need this money here in Ukraine to help our warriors and to help our civilians. And the last thing, then I think without press, we will speak more about negotiations where we are. Some things which I wanted to share with you. We need Europe in negotiations. We do what we can to involve Europeans as much as possible, and we count on your leadership in all this negotiation process. We will have trilateral format, I think, during this week or 10 days, and what can I say? We need peace, but we have to prepare to any other kind of challenges from Russian side.
I'm very skeptical, to say the least, on the fact that we will deliver a short-term peace. I mean, I think it's good to follow up these initiatives, but let's be lucid. There is no willingness on the Russian side to have a peace, and by the way, to have a robust and solid peace as we see it on our side. So this is why we have to follow up our effort. I completely agree with you, Keir and Volodymyr. We have to make very clear now about, first, your recent success on the ground, but at the same time on the fact that militarily, economically, and strategically, the Russians are being defeated at this very moment.
This war will only end when Putin realizes that he cannot win. That is why we must increase pressure on Russia. We must dry up Moscow's war funding. The 20th package of sanctions by the European Union has precisely this goal. Moscow is not as strong as it would like the world to think. Russia is not winning. Security in Ukraine and security in Europe are inseparable. European security cannot be negotiated without Europeans at the table. We stand with Ukraine for freedom, for sovereignty, and for a secure Europe.
Then came a dramatic escalation. On that very day, Russian intelligence dropped a bombshell, alleging that the United Kingdom and France were weighing the unthinkable, supplying Ukraine with a nuclear weapon. London and Paris stayed silent. No proof was offered, no documents revealed, yet the claim alone detonated across an already fragile landscape, injecting fresh volatility into a conflict teetering on the edge and pushing tensions into even more dangerous territory.
For all these past years, Ukraine has not concealed its intention to reacquire nuclear weapons. I'd like to remind you that just days before the special military operation began in February 2022, Ukrainian President Zelensky, speaking from the Munich conference podium, explicitly stated that the Ukrainian authorities had such an intention. But if we take a slightly deeper look into history, I would like to remind you that the whole issue of nuclear weapons in Ukraine actually began with a specific resolution, with a declaration of the Supreme Council of what was then known as the Ukrainian SSR on the 16th of July in the year 1990, where the fundamental principles were officially proclaimed upon which the future independent Ukrainian statehood would be constructed. And one of the three fundamental principles enshrined in this declaration is Ukraine's non-nuclear status. Subsequently, it was similarly enshrined in the Constitution of Ukraine. Extremely disturbing information has been released today by the Foreign Intelligence Service. There is absolutely no doubt that it is reliable. There is no doubt whatsoever that Great Britain and France, as nuclear powers who, in theory, bear a special responsibility for maintaining global stability and for the resolution of conflicts, are in fact currently the primary sponsors of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Moreover, they are prepared to escalate it into the realm of a nuclear conflict. There is also no doubt whatsoever that they are operating, on the one hand, completely detached and isolated from those democratic institutions which currently exist in their respective countries, but in very close collusion both among themselves and with the current authorities of Ukraine. It seems there's even an understanding, apparently, that in the future, Ukraine's acquisition of nuclear weapons was to be presented as its own indigenous Ukrainian development. However, beyond any shadow of a doubt, Ukrainians inherently possess no capacity for independent development without external assistance. For all these past years, Ukraine has not concealed its intention to reacquire nuclear weapons. I'd like to remind you that just days before the special military operation began in February 2022, Ukrainian President Zelensky, speaking from the Munich conference podium, explicitly stated that the Ukrainian authorities had such an intention. But if we take a slightly deeper look into history, I would like to remind you that the whole issue of nuclear weapons in Ukraine actually began with a specific resolution, with a declaration of the Supreme Council of what was then known as the Ukrainian SSR on the 16th of July in the year 1990, where the fundamental principles were officially proclaimed upon which the future independent Ukrainian statehood would be constructed. And one of the three fundamental principles enshrined in this declaration is Ukraine's non-nuclear status. Subsequently, it was similarly enshrined in the Constitution of Ukraine. And it was precisely on this basis that we recognized Ukraine's independence and sovereignty as a separate state, and subsequently entered into agreements, including the well-known Budapest Memorandum. So, Mukus what is currently taking place must of course become the subject of the broadest international discussion within those specific structures that are officially authorized to oversee the non-proliferation regime, including the United Nations Security Council and the IAEA, and the Special Conference on the Observance of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. By the way, the next 5-year review conference will be held no later than the end of April this year. The time has come to discuss this there as well. But without a doubt, this extremely alarming situation must also be discussed at the national level. And therefore we, the senators of the Russian Federation, have appealed. Our appeal is already, as they say, being sent through diplomatic channels to the addressees. We have appealed to our colleagues in the parliaments of Great Britain and France with a call to immediately initiate appropriate parliamentary investigations already within these days, because I'm quite sure no one consulted with their parliaments and no one discussed this issue with the political forces of the respective nations. This is what one might call a top-level conspiracy, hatched with the expectation that it would simply go through and that later all of this would be presented as a genuinely Ukrainian initiative, but it will not pass. There is absolutely no doubt that either our parliamentary colleagues in these countries, and we sincerely hope in the European Parliament as well, will fully grasp their responsibility for what is unfolding and recognize all the grave dangers that this particular conspiracy truly poses. We are well aware that various conspiracies have taken place there among them in Europe, but this specific conspiracy is far more egregious than some others. And they will find within themselves, if you so wish, the courage, the political courage, to at the very least pose some serious questions to their leaders, and at the very most, to call them to account for their decisions. There is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that Ukraine, as a participant in the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, bears precisely the same obligations under this international agreement, just like the nuclear powers themselves. Only nuclear powers under the treaty, there are articles 1, 2, 3, and 6, which very clearly and precisely stipulate that nuclear weapon states, firstly, shall not transfer nuclear weapons to non-nuclear weapon states, and secondly, non-nuclear weapon states shall not accept such weapons even when they are offered to them. So on the one hand, there are the obligations of France and Great Britain, and on the other, there are the obligations of Ukraine as a full participant in the non-proliferation treaty, and any deviation from these commitments naturally would constitute a fundamental breach of the treaty, and in this case, Ukraine would once again find itself an international outcast, radically violating its obligations. There is no doubt whatsoever that these leaders have long since discredited themselves through their unreserved support for Ukraine in this conflict and their infamous slogan, "War to the last Ukrainian," as well as by undermining all attempts at a negotiation process on the Ukrainian front. There's nothing new here, as they say, but nuclear weapons are, if you will, an additional chapter, an additional section in this list of violations that the leaders of the respective states commit. I'll emphasize again, without going through democratic procedures, which they are so proud of and which they try to teach the whole world. Through our direct appeal to parliamentarians, our colleagues in the UK and France, we still hope that, if you will, some professional sense will be stirred in them when they realize that without their consent, attempts are being made to drag their countries, their peoples, their own voters into a completely irresponsible venture. Perhaps then they will finally awaken to a clear understanding of their own responsibility and the resolve to first meticulously dissect situations of this nature and second somehow guarantee their non-recurrence in the future.